The air is getting chillier, the leaves are changing color. You know what that means. Winter is coming. But don't be afraid. Although the time change is coming, we're going to have shorter days, some chillier weather, maybe even some snowfall here in the Carolinas. But if you're interested in buying a house this winter or going into next spring, we're going to go over what the Fed said, the interest rates, and the current housing prices and where we might think they're going into next year. So make sure you watch the entire video to get all the information and make a good judgment for you and your family. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Before we go into what the Fed said last week, I want to point your attention to the left side of the screen. So if you guys are interested in buying a house, all of our contact information is on the left side of the screen. So if you want to call, text, or email, however you feel comfortable, that's how you can reach us. But now let's go ahead and get into this article that I found on Redfin. And the last Fed meeting, they did say that they were not going to raise rates. They were going to hold them where they were currently, but they did project them to stay up there longer than anticipated. Fed projects rates will be higher for longer, upping chance of elevated mortgage rates into next year. A lot of experts believe that the interest rates would be coming down toward the end of this year, or at the latest, the first or second quarter of next year. But with the Fed seeing the strong labor market, inflation still ticking back up a little bit, even though it wasn't much, it was still a little bit more for core inflation. They want to make sure that they don't come down with interest rates before the inflation is under control. So what they're saying is they're going to keep interest rates where they are right now. And currently today, as of my recording on September 26, 2023, interest rates are about 7.5%, which is one of the highest it's been, I believe, in the last 10, 15, or even 20 years. And we're going to get into those numbers as well. But they're going to keep it elevated, and they left the door open for them to raise it one more time to see if they need to get inflation under control. So what that means over the long term is resale houses, the ones where people have 3-4% interest rates, are not going to really be putting their houses up for sale because they want to keep their low mortgage rates for as long as they can. So unless something happens in their life that causes them to have to move or change locations, they're not really going to want to go that extra mile to sell their house, even if they will make a profit because of the elevated housing prices right now, because they're still going to have to buy a house with a higher interest rate, which means their monthly income is going to be affected by that. Next, we're going to go into interest rates, and this graph that I have up here goes back to 1971, and you'll see on this graph here, it kind of was going up for a while, and it peaked in October of 81 at 18.53%. Let's thank our lucky stars that we don't pay that much for interest. But that was the highest, and ever since then, big spike down, little spike up, and you can see the downward trend. Even during our tough times, during the 2000 dot-com bubble crash and the 2008 crash, you can see that about here. We didn't get that high. Even in 2012, I think was one of our major financial issues, they were still pretty low interest rates. Then they just got too low. It was just too low. 2.5 was around the lowest I think I've seen, 2.67, and then they had to come back up. Now, naturally, you think from 2.67 up to where we are now, about 7.5, that is a drastic increase. However, historically, it's really not that bad. Just looking back at these numbers, these were getting really too low for any sustainable future in the housing market. So they had to kind of fix that, and it had to come up. Now, it did come up a little bit faster than it should have, just because of the high inflation rates. So this was the fastest pace the Fed has ever raised rates. And I'm actually going to zoom in so you guys can see this a little bit closer. But this is the fastest they've ever raised rates. As you can see, this huge spike here, and then the spike again. And we're actually back on another upward trend. So this is actually the highest interest rates have been since about 2000. So that's about 23 years ago. And that's when they were right around 8%. They did creep above 8% during that time period, but then they quickly came back down. So I think the highest that we'll get, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong here, is around 8.5% or 8.25. And then they'll come back down just like this. See, as they came up here, and then it swiftly came back down. The Fed does not really want to hurt the economy so much. They keep talking about a soft landing, but at some point they're going to have to lower these interest rates so people can start, if they want to move, they can do that. They're going to have to lower these interest rates though, so families can have some liquidity so they can go out and buy those new cars, buy those new houses, get those loans, get those credit cards, because everything right now is just super high and they just can't really sustain this too much longer. And just to wrap up this interest rates part, I do believe that our peak will be around 8 or 8.25%, and I think that will be the threshold, and then they'll come down very quickly. At least that's my hope. We are going into an election year, and I know both parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party, want to have good economic data. You know, they can say that interest rates are going down, that inflation's going down. So we're going to see what happens on that front, because they both want to have some good news going into the election year. And the last thing today we're going to look at is median sales prices for homes since about 1965 or so. And you can see on this graph here, housing is really dependable. It goes up about 2 or 3% every year up until recently. We're going to kind of look at that as well. You can see that little spike on the end of the screen. But you can see it's been very level up until about the year 2000, and then you've seen some major spikes up and down. And then even during just preceding the 08 crash, you can see that it spiked up. So if you were one of those people that actually bought a house just before the financial crisis back in 2008, you can see that you were going to be underwater. You might have bought the house at the top and you're like, uh-oh, what am I going to do? And I'm going to zoom in for you guys here so you can see this a little more clearly. You might have bought at the top and paid top dollar. And you can see that, yeah, it went down for a couple quarters, but then even back in 2009, it started to creep back up again. So if you would have waited just about 2 years, because I do believe that housing is a long-term investment, you might have bought at the peak and it went down, but if you didn't sell, you didn't lose money, and then it just spiked right back up again. And from 2011, it didn't really start coming back down until 2018. And you can see this parabolic rise here. This was a huge run up, and it stopped about $337,000. Just that's the median for the entire United States. And then it kind of went down and it squibbled for a little bit. Then the pandemic hit, and then back in 2020, I've never seen anything like this. And you can see this in the history graph. It's never done anything like this. It went from $322,000 or so on the average median all the way up to $479,000. And that was quarter 2 of 2020, and this was quarter 4 of 2022. So just in about a 2-year span, that spiked up a lot. So Kristen and I get this question all the time. Did we buy at the peak? Should we buy now? Is there going to be another crash? Is there going to be another run up? And the truth is, no one really knows. You can only look at the historical data and see where we are and kind of guess on where we're going. But if you look at this number here in quarter 4 of 2022, which was only just a few short months ago, the median price was $479,000. And if you flash forward just a couple quarters, we're down to $416,000. So I'm not saying that the housing crash has already happened, but the reset is happening. It ran up too high, too fast during an unprecedented time, so it's going to have to come down and stabilize. Right now it's $416,000. We did notice a little bit slower of a summer, especially for resale houses, not so much for new construction. New construction was still doing very well, especially in the Charlotte area, but the resales were down. People just weren't moving because they love those low interest rates that they have, and they don't necessarily have to move. So what I think is going to happen here is that we're going to come down. We're not going to come down to, $322,000 again, or even to $337,000, but I do believe that we can come down to $400,000 or a little bit lower than that, especially depending on your area. Every area is different, but this is just the median. But I do predict this to come down a little bit more over the next 12 to 18 months, just because we're still in that great reset part of things, and you have to come down off of that huge rise. This huge spike is not sustainable in in the housing market. It's never happened before. So once this kind of settles down, and once interest rates settle down, everyone will be a little bit calmer. People ask, should we buy now? And my answer is kind of always the same. It's, do you need to buy or sell now? Do you need to upsize, downsize? Do you need to relocate for business? Is there something that's making you move? Because the truth is, you're never going to time the market perfectly. You might sell now and then prices go up and you lost a little bit. Or you sell at the peak and then it comes down, you made money, but then eventually it's always going to be a little bit higher. So The right time is for when you need to find a house and what fits your family's needs or your needs. So if you have questions about what your home is worth or a certain area to see if you can afford it, just give us a call, text, or email. We would love to help you. All right, and that's all I got for today's video. I hope I helped you all understand where we are with interest rates, where we are with the housing market, and where we're possibly going in the short-term future about the housing and interest rates. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to this video. It really does help us out. And if you have any questions, just reach out. We will love to help you. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.